The Shadow in the Mirror. The wind howled across the cliffs of Penobscot Bay, Maine, rattling the windows of the old lighthouse where Clara Whitmore had come to start over. It was 1998, and at 62, Clara felt the weight of her years. Her husband, Edward, had died suddenly 6 months ago, a heart attack, the doctors said, though Clara sometimes wondered if it was the strain of secrets he carried. She'd sold their cramped apartment in Boston and bought the derelict lighthouse on Owl's Head, hoping the solitude would mend her fractured heart. The tower, with its peeling paint and creaking floors, seemed to whisper stories of its own, but Clara dismissed them as the fancies of a grieving widow. She wasn't alone for long. The lighthouse needed repairs, leaky windows, rotting beams, and a temperamental generator. So Clara hired Tom Delaney, a local handyman in his late 20s, with a quiet demeanor and calloused hands. Tom arrived each morning in a beat-up pickup, his tools clanking as he worked. He was polite, but distant, asking few questions about Clara's past. She liked that. The less said about Edward, the better. One stormy evening, as rain lashed the cliffs and the lighthouse beam swept the churning sea, Clara's phone rang. She was in the kitchen, sipping tea and staring at the fog beyond the window. The number was Tom's. Odd, she thought. He'd left hours ago. Mrs. Whitmore? His voice was a hoarse whisper, barely audible over the storm. Is anyone else in the lighthouse? Clara's heart skipped. No, Tom. I'm alone. Why? A pause, heavy with static. I was fixing the upstairs window frame, and I saw someone. A woman. In the mirror in the hallway. She looked like you, but she wasn't you. Clara's grip tightened on the phone. Tom, you're scaring me. There's no one here. She was there, he insisted, his voice trembling. She stared at me, then turned and walked into the keeper's room. I checked. It's empty. I'm outside now, but you need to get out. Clara's legs felt unsteady as she set the phone down. The lighthouse was old, built in 1883, and its quirks were familiar. Creaking stairs, drafts that mimicked footsteps. But Tom's fear was real, and it stirred something in her. She grabbed a flashlight and climbed the spiral staircase to the second floor, her breath shallow. The hallway mirror, an antique Edward had insisted on bringing from Boston, hung opposite the keeper's room. Its ornate frame was tarnished, the glass cloudy. Clara stared into it, seeing only her reflection, graying hair, tired blue eyes, a face etched with loss. No one else. She checked the keeper's room, empty, as Tom said. The bed was neatly made, the air musty. Yet a chill lingered, as if the room held a memory it refused to share. Clara shook her head. You're being foolish, she muttered, but her hands trembled as she locked the door. She called the police, her voice unsteady as she explained Tom's sighting. An officer arrived within the hour, a gruff man named Officer Hale, who searched the lighthouse top to bottom. No signs of a break-in, he said, scratching his beard. Windows are sealed, doors locked. Probably just the storm playing tricks. He glanced at Tom, who stood soaked and pale by his truck. Kid's got an imagination. Clara paid Tom for the day and sent him home, promising to call if she needed him. But sleep eluded her that night. The storm raged, and every creak of the lighthouse felt like a warning. She kept seeing Tom's face, his wide eyes, his certainty. A woman who looked like her. It was absurd, but the thought gnawed at her. The next morning, Clara resolved to focus on the repairs. She needed normalcy, not ghost stories. But as she dusted the upstairs hallway, her fingers brushed the mirror's frame, and something shifted. A faint click, like a latch giving way. She froze, then pressed again. A panel in the wall beside the mirror popped open, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed and brittle. The first page bore a name in elegant script: Margaret Whitmore, 1965. Clara's breath caught. Margaret was Edward's first wife, who had drowned in a boating accident in 1970, years before Clara met him. Edward rarely spoke of her, saying only that her death had broken him. Clara had seen a photo once, a woman with her own blue eyes and sharp cheekbones, a resemblance that had unsettled her. She'd assumed it was coincidence. Now, holding Margaret's diary, she wasn't sure. She sat on the floor, the diary heavy in her hands. The entries began innocently. Margaret's excitement at moving into the lighthouse with Edward, her dreams of restoring it. But as the pages turned, her tone darkened. Edward's changed. He locks the keeper's room at night. Says it's for storage, but I hear footsteps. I'm starting to think he's hiding something. Or someone. The final entry, dated a week before her death, was chilling. I found a letter in his desk. It's not his handwriting. It speaks of a debt, a promise, a secret buried here. I'm scared, but I need to know. Clara's hands shook as she closed the diary. Edward had always been private, his past a locked door she'd never pried open. But this, secrets, footsteps, a letter, felt like a betrayal. She searched the keeper's room again, tearing through dusty trunks and shelves. Beneath a loose floorboard, she found a metal box containing a single letter, its ink faded but legible. It was addressed to Edward from a man named Victor, demanding payment for keeping her silent. The letter mentioned a hidden room behind the mirror. Clara's heart pounded as she returned to the hallway. She ran her fingers along the mirror's frame, searching for another latch. The storm had passed, but the silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant crash of waves. Finally, a second click. The mirror swung forward like a door, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A damp, musty smell wafted up, tinged with something metallic. She called Tom, her voice urgent. I found something. A hidden room? Can you come now? He arrived in 20 minutes, his face pale but determined. Together, they descended the staircase, Clara's flashlight cutting through the gloom. The room was small, barely 10 feet square, with a cot, a chipped sink, and a single chair. On the table lay a stack of letters, a half-eaten loaf of bread, and a photograph of Clara and Edward on their wedding day. But it was the figure in the corner that stopped her heart. A woman sat hunched in a tattered shawl, her white hair tangled, her face gaunt but unmistakable. It was Margaret, or someone who looked exactly like her. Her eyes, mirrors of Clara's, were wide with fear and recognition. Clara, she whispered, her voice raw. You found me. Clara's legs buckled. Tom caught her, his own face ashen. Who are you? Clara stammered, though she already knew. I'm Margaret, the woman said, her voice breaking. Your sister. The word hit Clara like a physical blow. Sister? She had no siblings, or so she'd been told. Her parents had died when she was young, and Edward had been her only family. But Margaret's story unraveled everything. She was Clara's twin, hidden at birth by their parents, to protect a family fortune tied to an old trust. Edward, their distant cousin, had discovered Margaret years later and married her to secure the inheritance. But when Margaret uncovered his embezzlement, he staged her death, locking her in the lighthouse's hidden room to keep her silent. He'd married Clara, her identical twin, to maintain the facade, using her resemblance to deflect suspicion. He said it was temporary, Margaret whispered, clutching a worn journal. He brought me food, promised I'd be free. But years passed. I wrote to stay sane, but he took my words, burned them. He said no one would believe me. Clara's mind reeled. Edward's late-night trips to the lighthouse, his insistence on keeping the mirror, his guarded demeanor. It all made sense. He'd kept Margaret alive, a prisoner in their home, while building a life with Clara on lies. The fortune, the lighthouse, their marriage. Everything was tainted. She helped Margaret to the kitchen, her thin frame trembling under Clara's touch. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed to pain her, her eyes squinting after years in darkness. Clara called the police again, her voice steady despite the storm in her heart. Officer Hale returned, his skepticism replaced by shock as Margaret recounted her story. The hidden room, the letters, and Margaret's DNA confirmed her identity. Edward's death had been a mercy, Clara thought bitterly. He'd escaped justice. But Margaret's journals, hidden in the room, were her salvation. They chronicled her imprisonment, her fears, and her dreams of freedom. Clara read them through tears, each page a testament to her sister's resilience. "You wrote to survive," she whispered, holding Margaret's hand. "I wrote for you," Margaret said. "I hoped you'd find me." Clara contacted a lawyer, determined to clear Margaret's name and expose Edward's crimes. The trust, still intact, rightfully belonged to both sisters. But Margaret wanted more than money. She wanted her story told. Clara found a publisher willing to take Margaret's journals, unedited as a memoir. The Woman in the Mirror became a sensation, its raw honesty captivating readers. Margaret, frail but fierce, attended the book launch, her first public appearance in decades. The crowd's applause was deafening, but her smile was for Clara alone. The lighthouse, once a prison, became a sanctuary. Clara and Margaret renovated it together, turning it into a retreat for women escaping their own shadows. They hung the old mirror in the entryway, its glass now clear, reflecting two sisters who had reclaimed their lives. Clara often stood before it, seeing not just her face, but Margaret's, a reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds the light.